Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the live Lowdown, and I am delighted on this episode to be joined by the Managing Director of OpenPay, Andy Harding, our headline partner for this year. Andy, thanks very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Look, so let's get straight to it. The content around Live is very much being formed by the huge changes we're seeing in the relationship between retailers and customers. Payments is clearly right at the heart of those changes. So talk to me about what the big shifts you're seeing in how retailers are responding to those shifts through the payments world.
Yeah, there's been some really interesting changes in the last 12 months, I think, particularly around younger consumers avoiding credit now. I don't know whether this has come from a legacy from university days and student debt, etc., but we're seeing a real shift in consumers moving away, younger consumers particularly moving away from credit and getting into debt. And so this has created an environment where taking control of their finances has become much more interesting. And the advent of open banking, I think, has seen the ability for consumers to take more control. And that control has meant an opening and an opportunity for other sorts of payment methods to come through, and particularly areas like buy now, pay later, where consumers aren't required to pay any interest on a loan, essentially, where they're repaying over typically three or four repayments. And that element of control is really attractive because there's no interest involved, there's no credit, and that gives them the ability to invest a little bit more up front and then take a little bit longer to pay back.
Yeah. I mean, those shifts have come incredibly quickly. I mean, the industry has evolved at enormous speed over the last 18 months, hasn't it? What are the implications for retailers then if they're not getting on top of this shift in the way customers want to buy?
Well, I mean, I think there is a massive tidal wave of consumer adoption for these sorts of payment methods, and I think that has meant increasing demand. And so the opportunity for retailers is there if they can take advantage of integrating with buy now, pay later solutions. And that gives consumers this control, which means that, as I say, they can spend a little bit more. So the opportunity for a retailer is to see, increases in average transaction value, a reduction in returns. And I think if they've got the bandwidth from a development perspective to take advantage, then it should be a big opportunity.
And is this one of those sort of big seismic shifts that is very difficult for retailers to get across and implement, or is this something that people should be getting a hold of and getting to grips with very quickly?
It's interesting. If you look at Australia, so buy now, pay later in Australia is fairly ubiquitous.
Yeah.
They're probably 2 years ahead of us, which is unusual because from an e-commerce and multi-channel perspective, they're probably similarly behind us, I would say, in adoption and maturity. So it's interesting. We've seen in that market this adoption and this take-up of buy now, pay later. So it lends itself to this market because of the similar cultural similarities and consumer behaviours, and this market's very, very credit orientated. So I think the opportunity is massive, but the expectation is fairly significant as well. So there's going to be a window, I think, where the first movers will get a significant advantage if they can integrate and if they can offer it. But I expect over the course of the next 6 months, we'll see a real transition, a real adoption change from consumer perspective.
And is there a reluctance from some retailers? Is it the same old brands and businesses that are the early adopters and are therefore likely to create even further gap in terms of performance and customer loyalty, and those that are the laggards, or have you been surprised by who's willing to adopt these sorts of methods?
Yeah, great question. I think actually there's been a split across different retail types. So multi-channel retailers, pure play retailers of all different verticals are taking advantage of these new payment methods. And I think the traditionally you'd see the pure plays being able to react quicker, being a little bit more nimble in their ability to take on new technologies. I don't think that's the case. I think it is relatively straightforward to implement with a payment method like this. So I don't think there are barriers, technological barriers, for which traditionally might have presented more of a use case for the pure plays to get involved quicker. But I don't think that's the case here. We're seeing businesses from across the retail spectrum take advantage of this. So it's a bit of an arms race. It's a bit who can get there first, and because they'll be the ones that take advantage of the change in the behaviour.
And now looking ahead in 3 months' time, March Retail Week Live, you've obviously been involved in the sector as a retailer and as sort of part of the Retail Week community for a decade or so, and have been to many, many Retail Week Lives. But obviously, you've come on board as our headline partner this year. Why now? What do you think is you're looking ahead towards the event in March and thinking, look, this is the right place for us to be interacting with retailers?
I think one of the most exciting things is the merging of tech and live together. I mean, historically, e-commerce and technology has been treated as the new kids and the younger generation, and separated a little bit organizationally as well from the strategic side of the business, the more experienced, the more senior C-level elements of of retail businesses. But clearly that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
And I think this transition now to having one conference with both elements to the whole of the retail value chain, I think is the most exciting bit, because we'll see CEOs engaging with technologies at a level that perhaps they haven't done before, but equally some of the more detail-orientated technological experts within business getting exposed to some of the strategic discussions that go on. And I think that blend together is a great opportunity for retailers really to pin down what the roadmap is going to be for the next couple of years.
And are you seeing both as your time as a retailer and now as your time as a partner and a supplier into the sector, a change in the dynamic about how decisions are being made within retail organisations?
I would say a little bit, yes. I mean, decision making is still taken at sea level, but I think a lot of the innovation and a lot of the thought leadership actually is coming from a different generation and different expertise within the business.
Yeah.
You know, typically we'd see leadership in the operations and the buying departments from traditional retail businesses, and actually now, you know, the engineering side of the business and the data side of the business is where a lot of the thought leadership's coming from. And I think, you know, the new wave of CEOs and leaders within the business really understand that innately. They've been brought up with it, so they get it. And I think that's meaning a slight shift in some businesses. Some businesses have been doing it. Actually, the most successful ones have been doing this for probably 5 years or more. But I think actually everybody else is understanding now that this is a real shift in the change in the way that businesses are being run.
Great. Well, what a great advert for OpenPay and a great advert for Retail Week Live. We'd encourage you to bring all your teams down to the event in March, and Andy and I look forward to seeing you there on the day.